The caffeine in your morning coffee was never meant to help you answer emails before breakfast. A coffee plant did not evolve it so humans could survive an 8 o'clock meeting. Caffeine is a chemical the plant makes for its own reasons, and some of those reasons are almost the opposite of what we use it for. In the right dose, caffeine can discourage insects, interfere with competitors, and even change the behavior of pollinators. Then one primate discovered that roasted coffee seeds made a dark, bitter drink that helped it stay awake. From there, things got out of hand. Caffeine is a natural alkaloid, a nitrogen-containing compound made by several unrelated plants. Coffee makes it, tea makes it, guarana and yerba mate produce it too. The interesting part is that coffee and tea did not simply inherit one ancient caffeine factory from a common caffeinated ancestor. Their caffeine-producing pathways evolved separately. Evolution arrived at a similar chemical solution more than once, using different biochemical routes. A young coffee leaf is a good place to look for why. Young leaves are expensive. The plant has spent energy building them, but they are still soft and easy for insects to chew. Coffee leaves contain caffeine, along with other defensive chemicals, and caffeine can make plant tissue less attractive or more harmful to some herbivores. Experiments with plants engineered to produce caffeine have even found that certain caterpillars avoid feeding on them. That does not mean caffeine is an all-purpose pesticide. Biology almost never gives us something that clean. The coffee berry borer proves the point. This tiny beetle spends much of its life inside coffee fruit, exactly where caffeine should be a problem. Yet it can tolerate the chemical unusually well. Research published in Nature Communications showed that microbes in the beetle's gut help break caffeine down. Remove or disrupt those microbes, and caffeine becomes much harder for the insect to handle. So the plant builds a chemical defense, and an insect evolves a way around it, with help from bacteria living in its digestive system. This kind of arms race is common in evolution. A coffee plant also puts caffeine in its seeds. That may help protect a valuable package of nutrients from being eaten, although the relationship between caffeine level and resistance to particular pests is not always simple. One study of coffee and the berry borer, for example, did not find a neat rule saying more caffeine always meant more resistance. Other chemicals, the insect's biology, and the surrounding ecology matter too. That sounds minor, but it matters. Caffeine is plant poison for insects, is useful as a first approximation, not a complete explanation. There is another possibility around seeds: competition. Caffeine released into the soil can inhibit germination or root growth in some plants under experimental conditions. Researchers have discussed this as a form of allelopathy, where one plant chemically interferes with another. Coffee seedlings themselves have to manage caffeine carefully too, because high concentrations can damage growing tissue. So the same molecule that may be useful outside the plant can become a problem inside it. Chemistry is useful right up until the dose is wrong. Now go to a coffee flower. The logic changes again. Coffee flowers produce nectar, and small amounts of caffeine can end up in it. Nectar is supposed to reward pollinators, so putting a defensive drug in the reward sounds like a bad design. But in a 2013 study in Science, bees that encountered caffeine at nectar-like concentrations formed stronger memories of a floral scent associated with sugar. In simple terms, caffeine helped the bees remember where the reward was. That creates a fascinating possibility. A flower may be using a low dose of the same compound that helps protect leaves to influence a pollinator's behavior. A bee visits, takes the nectar, flies off, and later remembers the flower's scent more strongly. That could encourage repeat visits. Not always, of course. Dose matters, species matter, and laboratory results do not mean every caffeinated flower is manipulating every bee in the same way. But the mechanism is real enough to make your espresso look a little less uniquely human. And then humans found coffee. The famous story says an Ethiopian goat herder named Kaldi noticed his goats becoming energetic after eating red coffee cherries. It is a great story. It is also a legend, not solid historical evidence. So it is safer to leave Kaldi with the dancing goats and move to what we know better. Coffea arabica is native to Ethiopia, where the species has its deepest genetic diversity. Historical and genetic evidence points to coffee being carried from southwestern Ethiopia across the Red Sea to Yemen, where it became an important cultivated crop by roughly the 15th century. In Yemen, coffee found a human use that matched caffeine perfectly. Sufi communities used coffee to help stay awake during long periods of nighttime prayer. That gives coffee an obvious practical advantage over a drink people merely liked the taste of. The drink did something. It extended wakefulness, supported concentration, and could be prepared again and again from a storable traded seed. The port of Mocha became one of the great names in the coffee trade. Yes, that is where the word mocha comes from. Coffee moved through the Islamic world, and coffee houses became social spaces in cities of the Ottoman Empire. People drank, talked, listened to news, played games, did business, argued about politics, and stayed for a while. Authorities occasionally tried to suppress coffee houses, partly because a room full of alert people talking freely can make rulers nervous. The bans did not solve the problem. People liked coffee too much. A 17th-century customer walking into a London coffee house was not entering something that looked like a modern cafe with Wi-Fi and a pastry case. The room could be noisy, smoky, and crowded, with newspapers passed hand to hand and merchants, sailors, pamphlets, and gossip competing for attention. Coffee houses became places where information moved quickly. Some developed specialized crowds. Merchants gathered in certain houses. Writers preferred others. Lloyd's of London traces its origins to Edward Lloyd's coffee house, where people connected to shipping met and exchanged information. Coffee also became fashionable in continental Europe. In France, the 1669 visit of Ottoman envoy Suleiman Aga helped turn coffee drinking into a fashionable court and salon habit. Then the habit escaped the elite. Cups, pots, roasting, serving rituals, coffee houses, an entire material culture grew around the drink. But popularity alone does not explain how a plant from Ethiopia became a crop grown across the tropics. European empires wanted control of supply. Coffee plants and seeds moved through trade networks into India, Java, the Caribbean, Latin America, and elsewhere. World Coffee Research notes that most Arabica cultivated outside Ethiopia descends from a narrow set of coffee that passed through Yemen, including lineages associated with Typica and Bourbon. One coffee plant taken from Java to Amsterdam in the early 18th century helped supply material that later spread through European colonial networks. This part of the story is not cozy. Coffee's global expansion was tied to colonial systems, forced labor, and slavery. Plantations in the Caribbean and Brazil produced enormous quantities for overseas consumers, and the human cost was brutal. The same drink that became associated with sociability, conversation, and intellectual life in European cities was also becoming a commodity built, in many places, through coercion. A sack of green coffee beans has another advantage. It travels. The beans can be dried, stored, shipped, roasted near the consumer, and brewed with fairly simple equipment. You do not need a tropical coffee tree growing outside your house. You need a supply chain. Once shipping, colonial agriculture, and urban demand connected, coffee could move far beyond the climate where the plant itself can survive. Then caffeine kept doing what caffeine does. As work moved away from daylight-bound agricultural schedules and toward factories, offices, transport systems, and later 24-hour cities, a legal stimulant with a familiar taste became extremely useful. Coffee did not cause industrialization. People had used stimulants long before factories. But a drink that makes many people feel more alert fits suspiciously well with a world of clocks, shifts, deadlines, and mornings that begin before the brain feels ready. The chemistry behind that alertness is different from the reason coffee plants make caffeine. In humans, caffeine mainly works by blocking adenosine receptors in the brain. Adenosine is part of the system that builds sleep pressure as we stay awake. Caffeine does not create energy from nowhere. It temporarily changes how strongly some of those tiredness signals are felt. That is why a cup can make a tired person feel sharper without paying back the sleep debt. So follow the molecule from leaf to laptop. In a coffee plant, caffeine is part of a chemical toolkit shaped by ecological pressures: herbivores, microbes, competitors, and pollinators. In a bee, a low dose can alter memory. In some insects, it is a toxin or deterrent. In others, evolution has produced workarounds. In humans, the same molecule interacts with a nervous system that the coffee plant never had any reason to care about. And humans responded by planting more coffee. That is the accidental part of coffee's conquest. Not that people randomly spilled beans into a cup and invented civilization. The accident is evolutionary. A molecule that helped a plant survive and reproduce happened to bind to receptors in our brains in a way we found useful. We liked the effect so much that we carried the plant across oceans, built plantations, created trading ports, designed specialized pots and machines, opened coffee houses, invented espresso, instant coffee, and drive-through cafes, and reorganized millions of mornings around it. The coffee plant made caffeine for itself. Humans mistook one of its chemical defenses for a feature, and from the plant's point of view, that may have been an astonishingly successful mistake. Wild Arabica began in a small part of Africa. Today, its descendants are cultivated across the tropical world because one animal became extremely interested in the bitter molecule inside its seeds. We drink coffee to stay awake. Meanwhile, we carried coffee around the planet.
Thanks for watching! If you enjoyed the video, please like, subscribe, and leave a comment below. See you in the next one!